Hi, I'm Dan Lagani with Silver Solutions, the senior home services company. Welcome to another episode of AgeWise. With every episode of the show, we strive to do one thing, and that's to make you and your loved ones a little smarter about the things you'll need to understand as you grow older. Today, we get into one of the thorniest questions for a lot of families, and that is, when's the time right to consider assisted living? We sat down with our guest, Debbie Howard of Senior Living Smart, a few weeks back. Debbie's got a fascinating background. She spent over 25 years in operating roles at the very senior levels of some of the largest operators of assisted living in America. And today she runs a consultancy where she works with many of those same communities to make resident experiences better. So she was a natural choice for the conversation. We covered everything from the must-have questions that you should be asking of any community you're looking into, to the true cost of assisted living, and even a look at the future in terms of what to expect in terms of developments in the communities in the years ahead. So if you've got a loved one that's growing older and you're looking at assisted living, this is a must-watch episode of AgeWise. Debbie Howard, thanks so much for joining us today on AgeWise.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Debbie, one of the things that is so clear is that the decision to look at assisted living is an emotionally charged one. So let's get right to it. How do you know when the time is right for you or a family member to consider moving to assisted living?
So I would say it's really when something has changed either cognitively, socially, or physically that's impacting the quality of life. And the person is just, not being maybe as successful at home as they have in the past. And that's a little bit different for really everyone. But when it really starts to impact, day-to-day living and decision makers and being successful and leading a fulfilling life, and you start noticing those kind of changes and decline, it really is time to start looking. Unfortunately, a lot of people wait until there's a crisis, and then you're not in a position to make the best decision. So making this transition out of choice instead of crisis is always going to have the best result.
What a great comment. Choice versus crisis. So with that in mind, if the decision's made and it's time to look, what are the questions that family members should prepare in advance of any community visit so that they have the best understanding of that particular environment?
So I always encourage families to kind of create a list of non-negotiables and nice-to-haves. Because in a lot of ways, communities can seem the same from the outside. Everyone's going to be offering you a variety of, lifestyles and apartment choices and dining programs and transportation and care and all of those types of things. But there are probably some things that you or your loved one that's super important to them. And so what are those non-negotiables that, for one person, it might mean that they've been a lifelong swimmer and having a pool is going to be important for them to be able to maintain something that they really enjoy. For other people, it's going to be something different, but really taking a look at who's going to live there, what's going to make this experience really a positive one for them, and making those your non-negotiables.
So I said in the intro, you spent over 25 years working for different operators, one of which was a role where you were overseeing sales and marketing for over 200 communities across the country. So clearly you have a depth of experience that's quite extraordinary. When you think about the nice to haves and the must haves, what are the things that if you could wave a wand and have people fully understand about assisted living in 2024 that you'd like to wipe away in terms of the misconceptions and the myths?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of them. Number one, absolutely, this is not a nursing home. It's not a dressed up, fancy nursing home. And that has, positive and negative ramifications, right? So it does deliver care in the privacy of your apartment. It does offer a lot more kind of choice and respect and independence. But it also does not offer that really skilled care that you need. And And every state regulates assisted living differently. And so in some states, like where I am in Massachusetts, it's a social model. The nurses really can't do a lot of hands-on nursing, like injections or putting in eye drops. The resident has to be capable of doing those things themselves. In other states, like nearby Connecticut, it's very much of a different model, a medical model, where they can go a lot farther into the aging process and providing more skilled nursing care. So, I do think people have to understand the differences so that they have a clear expectation about what the operator can and cannot do within their state.
Are there, over the years, techniques, tried and trues that you think have made somebody's transition from living independently to moving into assisted living smoother and easier?
Yeah, I would say it's about empowering your loved one to be part of the decision process. Even if it cannot be their decision to move into a community, how else can we empower them? Can we bring them into the conversation about which apartment? Do you want the 1 bedroom or the 2 bedroom? Do you want it overlooking this, or do you want that view instead? Somewhat about, the timing and what to bring, and, how to, help kind of downsize the decoration of the apartment. You can't bring the stuff, but you can bring the memories. So I think as much as we can empower them in the parts of the transition that, bring them into it and make them a part of it, so they feel like it's less that they have they have control over something within that decision process. That's what I've always found. Bring them back for visits and have lunch, to get them to know the team before you move in, so that, the first day that they're at the community is not maybe the first and only time they've experienced it, but maybe they've attended an event, an open house, a luncheon, things like that.
At the risk of sounding self-serving, Silver Solutions provides a range of services, which is acting as a senior move manager, and we handle the logistics of getting mom or dad from their current residence into a community. And I have to say, the wish list process that we go through up front in describing the number of things that they can comfortably take into the new community when we see a floor plan, and then being able to help them identify the things that are going to matter most emotionally. Not just everybody's going to need a bed, everybody's going to need a chair, a sofa, but it's, in our view, also ensuring that they're surrounded with the things that are familiar and that remind them of what's important in their lives. That goes such a long way.
100%. When we interview, I think AARP did a focus group of people who were kind of in the decision process for moving to a senior community. And the number one thing that they said would be most helpful to them in making a decision and making a transition was help with the sale of the house and the moving and the downsizing and the dispersing, that it was the number one barrier to making that decision. And so certainly the operator that has those kind of resources in place really positions himself much more favorably to prospective residents than those that are going to handle a bunch of different business cards and say, go figure it out for yourself.
What is the expectation that families should have when they're thinking about a quality community? Not everything needs to be upscale, but what's the range of a monthly expense for a family to go into a studio or a 1 bedroom apartment? Just give us some parameters around that.
It depends on lifestyle and level of care. Independent living, obviously a lot less expensive because there's not a lot included and there's very low overhead for the operator. When you get to assisted living, I think that the average in the country is around $4,500 to $5,000 a month. And then as we get into memory care, which is a lot more staffing, a lot more risk, a lot more care needed. Certainly we are up in that 6,500, 7,000 and more, really depending on if you're in a rural market or if you're in a metro market, how old the community is. The more bright and shiny, the newer the finishes, costs a lot more to build a brand new community. And so they have to charge higher prices. And oftentimes the communities that are 20 and 25 years old, they have the best locations because they had those A markets when they were building. Now all those markets are gone. And they usually have larger apartments as well. And they have 20 to 25 years of experience, whereas a new operator, may not. So I think that's where kind of the non-negotiables and the must-haves really come in, to understand what's most important to you, and then understanding what your financial resources are.
Let's move to a slightly different topic. When you think about your depth of experience around communities, what's the biggest change from when you started to today? And the second part of that question is going to be, what are the things you think or hope we're going to see in the next several years that'll be the continued evolution of what assisted living and senior living communities can offer?
I think the biggest change really is the buyer. So when I started off 25 years ago, we were selling to the greatest generation, the go along, get along generation. And, they were wonderful. You could have an operating model that would say, this is our dining program. This is when the dining room's open. Here's our menu. It's going to change every 5 weeks. Here's where you're going to sit. You're going to sit with the same folks. This is our transportation schedule. And, it was all about the resident really adjusting to the operational model that worked for the provider. And now we have the boomers, and they are not go along, get along. They are the sushi and cappuccino generation, the have it your way generation. And that model is not going to work. So I think for the operators, it's really about, how do you operationalize choice? Because if you have 100 residents in your building, you have 100 different versions of how their day should go. And today's buyer expects the operator to adapt to them rather than the other way around. So a huge shift in who the buyer is, which requires an enormous shift in how we position our clients, and what messaging and what images and photography and video, how they like to make a decision is very, very different.
It's so interesting because what you're really hitting at is broader societal trends make their way into senior living. I mean, one of the things that I see personally is, either when I'm in New York City or South Florida, which I split my time between both, is the rise in urban luxury senior living. And it wasn't something that you previously would have associated Manhattan being an epicenter of really wonderful high-end choice. And yet it, in fact, has made its way there. If you had to think 5 years from now, what are some of the things that you're going to continue to see more of, that you may see an inkling of today, that'll be an indication of what assisted living is heading towards going forward?
Yeah, I think that there will be a lot more kind of resident choice in every area of the operation. So multiple dining venues, more customization, more personalization for each resident. I think more of a reliance on technology to accomplish that. So, we've already seen people move to the smart apartments where, the residents have all of their technology, all of their kind of communication built in. We used to have residents go out and put it like a little sign on their door that they had woken up for the day, so that people would know that the resident is up and about. And now all of it's kind of technology monitoring. It's remote monitoring. So I think from a healthcare perspective, you're going to find all of the apartments kind of built with passive sensors, probably the bed being also rigged with some kind of sensors. So we're going to know how well a resident slept. We're going to be taking blood pressure and temperature. We're going to know when to intervene. We're going to see changes in patterns. So maybe a resident, used to be up at this time and now they're not, or they used to not get up at night. Now they're getting up 3 or 4 times. So I think there's going to be a lot of proactive intervention from a healthcare perspective. I think we'll see more technology improvements in resident care and monitoring in general, so that we're not going to wait for a crisis, but there will be all the technology that will be predictive in nature. So we'll be able to take a look at, which residents are a fall risk even before they've had a fall.
Debbie, before we go, sum it up. What are the top 3 things that can lead to a more successful outcome for somebody transitioning from living independently into some form of community-based setting? What are the things they should be considering and thinking about?
I think number one, they should be having conversations before there's a need or a crisis. So I had that conversation with my mom before she moved into assisted living. And for her, she was very clear that when she lost the ability to drive and get around independently, and that would mean that she was pretty much cut off and at home alone because she couldn't get out to her clubs and activities and friends and church and volunteer things, that for her was going to be the trigger. So, I think having those conversations proactively about what does that look like, and it's probably different for everybody, is number one. Number two, I think is looking for those early signs, not dismissing, oh, dad, I was just on a call with somebody whose dad got lost in his car for the first time and didn't know where he was and didn't know how to get home. Well, you can either take that as an event and a warning sign before something, more tragic happens, and be proactive around that. Or you can just dismiss it and say, oh, he was confused, or he didn't have his breakfast, or, the road was closed, or, he had to go a different direction or something. We have a lot of magical thinking with families. Mom fell, but she's not going to fall again. Dad got lost. He's not going to get lost again. The scariest word in senior living when it comes to assisted living and memory care is yet. That's a terrible word. This hasn't happened yet. Don't wait for the yet. Really look at those early things. And then I would say the third thing is have a financial plan. Understand, where you are financially, all of the benefits, because hopefully you're going to move in out of choice, not crisis, and that's great. But if there is a crisis, at least you won't be looking for all those documents and where are the stocks and where's the bank accounts and where's dad's veteran paperwork. Assemble all of that now and everything will go smoother.
Great words of wisdom to end on. Debbie Howard of Senior Living Smart, thanks so much for joining us today on AgeWise and for sharing your super informed inside tips on how anybody looking at an assisted living move can be more successful. If you like this episode of AgeWise, please share it with a friend. And if you want to get other episodes, you can go to silversolutions.com and click on the resources tab. You'll see every back episode. By the way, you'll also see the first chapter of our new AgeWise Family Caregivers Guide book. You can download that for free as well. And of course, if you want to get every episode as they're coming out, you can just sign up on the Apple Podcast platform and become a subscriber. I'm Dan Lagani. In behalf of all of us here at Silver Solutions who work hard every day to help you and your loved ones live better, longer, stay safe and be wise.